I don't know, maybe other people will have to join us as we progress in the discussion. I want to welcome everyone this morning for this event. This is an important event. I mean, considering what is happening in the market, I'm pretty sure a lot of us are aware that a lot of things have been happening within the power sector. With the federal government agreement with Siemens to revamp the power sector, federal government selling some of its interest in some of the GEMCOs, and a lot more has been happening within the power sector. But this morning we are going to be looking at the mass metering program that was introduced by the president or by the presidency to to provide meter for almost all households in Nigeria within a period of time. And this morning we have some industry players and people from the regulators in the mass metering program in Nigeria. But without wasting much of the time, I would like to introduce our moderator, somebody I so much respect. Please, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to read her profile. Our moderator, Kofo, Olokun-Olawoyin. She holds second-class upper degrees from the prestigious University of Lagos and the Nigerian Law School, Abuja campus, where she obtained a law degree and Nigerian bar qualification certificate. She holds 2 master's degrees in European Union Business and Taxation Law from the University Dafe in France and International Commercial Law from the University of Dundee in UK, where she made distinction and merit respectively. She is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Governance Institute, United Kingdom, formerly the Institute of Chartered Secretary and Administrators, and a fellow of the Institute of Credit Administration, Nigeria. Kofo has over a decade of active legal practice and experience which extends to cross-border financing, energy, telecommunication, corporate finance, banking and finance, project finance, public-private partnership, and legal advisory and company secretarial services. Kofo holds numerous certificates from foreign institutions in various areas, including energy, project finance, international financial markets, etc. She recently authored the fast-selling book titled The Nigeria Electricity Supply Industry, Post-Privatization Realities, Trends, and Challenges, a 64-page professional and academic material which provides remarkable details on all that needs to be known about the Nigerian electricity supply industry and covers various aspects of electricity, including basic knowledge of engineering, policies, law, regulations, business, negotiation, and investment strategy, just to mention but a few. She periodically contributes articles for publication on salient issues within the power sectors in the Business Day newspaper and was a major contributor to the World Bank report on 2015. Kofo worked with 2 of Nigeria's top-tier commercial law firms of Banwo and Igodadu and Paul Usoro and Co., both in Lagos, Nigeria, where she was part of and led teams that successfully closed multi-million complex agreements and profiling of crucial legal advice, which have had and continue to have profound positive impact within the power sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, please can we welcome our moderator while she take over and coordinate this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And such a pleasure and honor to actually moderate this very important session today. Power, no doubt, is very essential and crucial to every economy, not just Africa or Nigeria, but the world as a whole. And advanced metering infrastructure cannot really be left out. It's very instrumental to aiding the progress or the development of the power sector. It's so important to all utility companies, it's important to customers, consumers, and it's important to the regulators, to the government. And some of the benefits actually include, to us, the consumers, you and I, fair billing. We want to be sure that we are actually paying for what we actually consumed, the exact power consumed. And also for the discos, it also helps them to reduce their collection losses. And this in turn also aids their liquidity issues and also, trickle down to also helping the economy as a whole. And so basically, metering is, the importance of metering cannot really be overemphasized. And that actually is underscored by this NERC regulation, which was this NERC regulation on connection and disconnection procedure, which actually imposes an obligation on discos to ensure that at every point a customer is being connected to electricity, there is going to be an installed meter. But because of the infrastructure and liquidity challenges that have been ongoing, it's really been difficult for the discos to achieve this. So in the past, we've seen different metering initiatives that have been established just to help bridge the metering gap that exists in the country.
I'm already in. So
okay, so going from the popular CAPME, which is the credit advance payment metering implementation, to the regular general rollouts, which the discos were supposed to do in accordance with their metering plan that is submitted to the NERC, and to the meter asset provider scheme that was also introduced sometime in 2018. But recently, the federal government came up with a national metering initiative known as the Mass Metering Program. And in October, the Central Bank of Nigeria actually issued a framework that is going to assist in financing or supporting the various stakeholders in ensuring the implementation of this national mass metering scheme. As stakeholders and end users, I'm sure we are all eager to know about this program, to know the extent of the impact that is going to have on us. How is it going to improve? Improve the economy, improve our situation, improve the power sector. What are the supports we can give and all of that? So this particular session is to aid this understanding and help us with the implementation. And to do this, we have some of the best minds, the experts in this industry, and we have all major stakeholders actually represented. We have the initiator of the program, which is the presidency here. We have the regulator, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, the NERC. We have them, we have Redneck here. We have one of the major stakeholders, also a distribution company. We have a local meter manufacturer as part of the panelists today. And then, of course, we have you, wonderful audience, and myself as the customers, who are the end users. And so we're really excited to have this session today. And we are hopeful that we're going to be able to get as much knowledge and understanding of the program. So without further ado, I'll just go straight to introduce the panelists today. We have here today, I don't think he's joined yet, but he'll be joining us, is Mr. Dafe Akpeneye. Mr. Dafe Akpeneye is the commissioner that leads the legal licensing and compliance division at the NERC. In this role, is primarily responsible for issuing licenses to all participants in the NERC, enforcing the provisions of the Electric Power Sector Reforms Act, and also resolving industry complaints disputes. Okay, I've just been told that I think Mr. Akpeneye is here with us. You're welcome, sir. He graduated from the Obafemi Awolowo University with the Bachelor of Laws degree in 2001 and was admitted to the Nigerian bar in 2003. He worked briefly with the law firm of Dafe and Co. before proceeding to join Ibrahim Yakubu and Co. in Ikeja for the National Youth Service Corps program. He joined the leading commercial law firm at Mogobi and Okeke upon his return to Lagos in 2004, where he worked until he joined the Nigerian member firm of the PricewaterhouseCoopers PwC Global Network of Firms in December 2005. He led the regulatory services practice at PwC Nigeria and was also the general counsel of the firm in Anglophone West Africa until his resignation on 31st of January 2017 to take on the role at NERC following his nomination as a commissioner by President Buhari in July 2016, and subsequently as Nigeria and the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. It's nice to have you here, Commissioner. You're welcome. The second panelist I will be introducing here is Engineer Ahmad Zakari. Engineer Ahmad Zakari is the special advisor to the President on infrastructure. Before his appointment as special advisor, Engineer Zakari built an impressive career at General Electric, where he acquired extensive experience, expertise, and knowledge of the electricity, as well as the oil and gas sector. From 2012 to 2014, he held the position of the Executive Director and Audit Manager of Sub-Saharan Africa at the Middle East Division of GE Corporate. In 2015, he was appointed as the Chief Operating Officer of General Electric Nigeria. In 2017, he got increased responsibility, being appointed Executive Director for GE's power business in Sub-Saharan Africa. In that position, he was responsible for the company's gas power business in Nigeria and South Africa, with over 150 turbines and up to 8 gigawatts of installed capacity. In 2019, he was appointed as a special advisor to the President on infrastructure. Engineer Zakari also serves as the secretary to the Presidential Power Reform Coordination Working Group. Engineer Zakari has degrees in electrical engineering and economics and is actively involved with community and emirate affairs in his native Jigawa state. You're welcome, Engineer Zakari. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
The third panelist is Mrs. Olubunmi Olukoju. She is a well-rounded finance executive with over 20 years experience in the energy sector, holding progressively senior roles throughout her career, managing financial planning, management reporting, accounting, treasury, taxation, etc. As a former auditor, she was engaged in assurance assignments that cut across all sectors of the oil and gas industry, consumer and industrial markets. Over the years, Mrs. Olukoju has demonstrated leadership in driving strong financial oversight, integrity, and operational excellence, and has a solid track record for the delivery and building of trust at board and C levels by consistently exceeding business goals through strong stakeholder focus, superior team leadership, collaboration, and keen business acumen. She is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria and an alumnus of Harvard Business School and Manchester Business School. Mrs. Olukoju joined the power sector as part of the transition team on privatization in 2013, a track record of establishing cross-functional partnerships to deliver stellar results in the areas of business transformation, people development, change management, and the development and implementation of business strategies. As Chief Financial Officer of AB PLC, led to Mrs. Olubunmi's transition to Ikeja Electric PLC as the Chief Financial Officer in 2016. From her days as Senior Manager at KPMG Professional Services and Financial Controller at Sahara Energy, Mrs. Olukoju has consistently demonstrated a passion for negotiation, business, and financial strategy. Under our auspices, the Sahara Power entities have achieved tremendous feats in the midst of huge regulatory uncertainties and financial constraints. Key amongst these feats is the achievement of the lowest ETC and C-loss reduction in the Nigerian power distribution sector from 49.9% at takeover to 25% by the Ikeja Electric team in 2019. She is result-oriented, who is open to new ideas, and when she's not doing energy, she is traveling and planning next level daredevil exploration. Thank you so much, Mrs. Olukoju, for joining us today. It's nice to have you here with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes. I have here as the fourth panelist, Ms. Chantelle Abdul. Ms. Chantelle Abdul is a consummate businesswoman, key power sector stakeholder, and serial entrepreneur. She's as the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Mojec International Holding. Ms. Abdul presides over a portfolio of companies that are leaders in their respective industries, namely Mojec Meter Asset Management Company, Vetrity Solaris Power, Mojec Meter Company, Agriculture, and Meter Service Hub. The role for which is most recognized, however, the role for which is most recognized is in a capacity as CEO of Mojec Meter Asset Management Company and Mojec Meter Company. Before joining Mojec, she was the Vice President, Development at the Executive Group, TEG, a Washington-based consulting group known for bilateral trade and advisory in critical sectors. Our first venture in Africa was the license acquisition and rights of production and broadcast of the African version of Donald Trump's acclaimed business series, The Apprentice Africa. She later went on to launch her own investment series called the Billionaire Executive Series. Ms. Abdul, who graduated cum laude from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., that's bachelor degree in biotechnology and economics, began her career with Solomon Smith Barney in Washington, D.C. in 2002, and later at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter in 2003 to 2004. She's in the process of acquiring an executive MBA from the United States. It's nice to also have you here, Ms. Abdul. So without wasting more time, we would like to go straight into the program of the day, and we're going to start with Engineer Zakari. Being the initiator of the program, it's really nice to hear from you to understand, the basis behind this, what actually informed the government to set this up, what inspired the government, what actually made the other initiatives fail, what to expect, the challenges you actually encountered while you were coming up with this framework, and the ones you envisage and the ways you intend to actually block this loophole. So over to you, sir. You have the floor.
Okay. Kofo, thank you very much for the articulate lead-in, and very excited this morning to be with the Young Lawyers Forum. I think it's always good to have these kind of conversations, and I will commend that the forum, as we know of those of you that are learned, has been very detailed in their understanding of where we are. I think part of our challenges in the country at times is that there's guidelines that are set out, there's regulatory orders, and people don't read them, and they seek to, with cynicism, look at a negative approach. But it's all our country, and we need to continue to be solution driven. And this is why I think this is a very important event. Thank you for having me. Everyone on the call, from Dafe, me, and Chantelle, we work very closely together on this because teamwork is very important in making successful any program. When we look at it, the sector, the power sector, without it being successful, we will not have a successful economy in this country, despite what we may seek to do. And the Buhari administration is very focused on ensuring that, in the life of the administration, we put the power sector on an insurmountable trajectory to progress. I think, obviously, the process continues to be iterative on reforms. We learn and we adapt. I think Commissioner Dafe will talk more about, the regulatory interventions through CAPNI and MAP, and, more in detail on why we landed where we landed. But, there was a lot of concern by citizens around a flat tariff increase for everyone. And that was the intent that was initially had through the hearings and the visits that the discos, supervised by NERC, did to announce that in March we were going to raise tariff for everyone by 50%. Now, if you imagine that, on average, a kilowatt hour of electricity should cost about 51, 55 naira, and we've been charging a flat rate of 31. for, I think, on average since 2015 to 2019, you can see that the 20 naira difference has been continuously made up by government. Government realized through analysis that obviously the people that are consuming more energy are taking more of the subsidy, and we do know that areas where the discos are guaranteed revenue were more focused on. So if you think places like Metama, Ikoyi, where there's a lot of metering and stable power supply, there was no excuse for government to be subsidizing people that could afford it. So the first step was coming up with the service-based tariff that said that if we have people that are getting the right quality of service, they should pay. And then people that had poorer quality of service should continue to be subsidized while the government, through the regulator, enforces improvements through their performance improvement plans. So despite a lot of the shouting, it's very transparent, and 55% of Nigerian citizens today on grid still have a full subsidy from the rate they were paying prior to September 1st. So anybody in band D and E, which make up 55% of the on-grid population, are still paying the 31 naira per kilowatt hour on average. Now, for us to be able to eliminate the subsidy and ensure that citizens are paying for what they consume, metering was a huge issue. And you can imagine distribution companies that for a number of years have not been able to charge cost-reflective tariffs did not have the liquidity to be able to do a bulk procurement and mass metering. We saw that the gap was about 6 million connections, which on average can be anywhere from 20 to 30 million citizens did not have meters and were on estimated billing. So alongside a short-term measure of the capping regulation, this mass metering initiative to provide low-interest financing to discos to bulk procure meters, the purchase will be driven by the central bank, and the beneficiaries or the obligors will be the discos. And in phase one, we just started rolling out 1 million meters. We'll do a balance of 5 million over the next 24 months. And we also have loans for meter manufacturers to be able to ramp up their capacity. So all of the meters that we're going to purchase under this program are going to be purchased locally in Nigeria, and will be manufactured here as well, which should create jobs, that our friends at Mojec and other manufacturers will be able to support, both through manufacturing and through installation. So we're very excited about this. We thought that if government didn't step in, the discos, with the lack of regulatory certainty in the past, as well as difficulties on their balance sheets, they wouldn't be able to get regular commercial loans to do this program. And we said that, okay, take this money with the caveat that at the point of deployment, all citizens should get meters for free. And then over time, through the tariff and other cost recognition measures, discos can make their money back. But we don't envisage, and we will be very strict on anyone that we find charging citizens for meters. Even the individuals that have paid already through the MAP, the regulator has requested that through a mechanism of up to 5 years that they be fully reimbursed for what they've paid. So the president is very particular about this. He thinks that people not being metered allows for cheating to happen in the sector. And every time we see him, his question to us in the power reform group is, how are you guys metering? So there's quite a bit of pressure on everyone. And we're very excited, and we think we'll be successful in this endeavor. Thank you, Kofo.
Okay, thank you so much, Engineer Zakari. From what you've said, we see that the main reason for this is just to be able to, bridge the metering gap, which we've always been talking about. And we appreciate the fact that the commissioner is going to be speaking to us on why the other ones actually failed so far. But from what you've said, they're going to be in phases. You've said that phase 0 is probably going to tend to like maybe 1 million from the 6 million deficit identified as the gap at the moment, and then subsequently we are going to have 5 million meters, that will be assigned to the local manufacturers only. We are also excited about this, but before we actually ask further questions, I would like to hear from Mrs. Olukoju what this actually means for the distribution companies, because if there's any stakeholder that is going to be really affected by this, is going to be the DISCO because of the ATC and C laws. We've actually been talking about this ATC and C laws, how to measure the health of the DISCO and all that. And giving this opportunity to be able to bridge the metering gap, definitely is going to reduce the collection losses for the DISCO, and it's probably going to further reduce the ATC and C. So what does this mean to the DISCO? And from what Engineer Zakari actually said, you were actually part of the deliberation. So you could actually just let us into that perspective as a distribution company, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Good morning, panelists. Good morning, all. This for us is a welcome development. We're glad that the federal government, working with CBN, Ministry of Finance, and our own regulator, NERC, had come up with this arrangement. And as Engineer Zakari said, it's very important to move into this next phase of service reflective tariff. As we all know, one of the issues we've had at DISCO is the concern around billing, estimating customers. As much as we try to determine estimates for customers based on a scientific and logical manner, I'm like, you can tell yourself all the stories of how what you've done is fair, what you've done is scientific. For a consumer, to the extent that the consumer cannot see it at their own end, that what they've been billed really is their consumption, it is a challenge, is a problem. And so this national mass metering program, for us, we're grateful. The truth is almost similar to what MAP arrangement was like. It's just a bit of a change, because whether you're looking at MAP or you're looking at national mass metering program, all is in an effort to ensure that the revenue of the DISCO is guaranteed, to ensure that the customer gets some level of comfort in terms of being billed what they've consumed. And more importantly, now that tariff is tending towards cost reflective, you want to ensure that a customer that feels is being billed higher, is paying more, feels is paying for value as against being estimated. And the biggest issue in the sector, as you rightly said, Kofo, is ATC and C, which is the aggregate technical, commercial, and collection loss. For most DISCOs, the biggest part of ATC and C is collection loss, because your investment in the area of technical monitoring your network will sort of help with technical and commercial loss. But collection loss is a whole lot of work to get customers who are not metered to pay. So metering would obviously improve our collection efficiency. And when the collection efficiency improves, it also puts the DISCO at a better position with respect to meeting their own obligations to the market. Because as you may know, one of the challenges in the sector has also been how much can the DISCO pay back to the suppliers of the power? How much can DISCO remit back to NERC? And so this metering initiative would to a large extent achieve that. And again, with the SRT, where you have a group of customers having to pay more, I think it's just fair to ensure that those customers are metered. Is there any reason why customers were not metered before? I think it's clear, the major issue we've had is funding. And so this national mass metering program is a package that comes with funding. And I think is a package that is good for both the DISCO and even the maps themselves. Because today, the reason why we haven't seen a lot of volume pushed through by maps is partly funding constraint. Some maps are waiting to collect upfront payments from customers to be able to bring in meters. Some that can bring in could have logistic concerns where they can't bring in as much as required. So you see that when the funding challenge is out, it sort of helps to bridge metering gap. And for the customers that you've increased tariff, if I could just bring in for Ikeja Electric, we have this bilateral arrangement with the likes of Magodo, GRA, and some other estates. And for us, part of the precondition to even switch off customers on a higher tariff is metering, because it eliminates disputes around billing, it eliminates the extra cost of having to collect from customers. So similar case, when you have customers, you're given 20 hours of supply, you're charging as high as 50 naira, it's just fair to prioritize those customers for metering. And what National Mass Metering Plan will do on that map, where the first phase of map was having customers that are willing to pay for meters. So you have customers across the network making a choice of paying. For national mass metering, is a bit different because it will have been similar to what phase 2 of MAP will do, which is mass meter rollout. So with the national mass metering, there's a planned meter rollout. You basically give your plan to regulator, once approved, that same plan you share with the maps, and to get a mass meter rollout done. Under the map, we've been challenged with mass meter rollouts because of negotiation gridlock. There's a lot of expectation from the maps, from the DISCOs. You want some level of guarantee. If you meter a customer and the customer is not paying, the DISCO make the payment. I'm like, it would have been good to say the DISCO will make the payment, since the DISCO is also a beneficiary of the meter. But of course, there's liquidity constraint. So this national mass metering plan has sort of helped to eliminate that concern, because now both the DISCO and the MAP now have access to cheaper funding. On the part of the DISCO, there's less concern around security, because the DISCO's security for this arrangement is the DISCO's collection, which can secure the program. So there's more focused metering. You can say, oh, this feeder A, feeder B, feeder C, in January will be metered. So regardless of whether there's a willing customer or there's no willing customer, on those feeders, everyone is metered. And so gradually, you can do focused metering that eliminates collection losses in areas, until you do that throughout the network. In terms of this arrangement, could it come with possible challenge, as in whether it's national mass metering plan or is MAP? Once you do a mass meter rollout, there might be some challenges, because you can find ourselves in a situation where you have meters available, you want to meter the customer, but you can't access the customer's premises. So for us, part of the plan is early stakeholder engagement, sensitizing the customer, because now you have a rollout plan. If I know that my first location, take for instance, is Alausa, you start engaging the customer to say, 1st January, we're going to have our maps come into this area and do the installation, so that could take out those concerns. The other thing is how much of meters can we readily have available locally? Because as you may know, under the National Mass Metering Plan, importation of fully assembled meter is prohibited. And to be fair, there's a good side to it. We also need to ensure that we can encourage local production, we can create jobs locally. And so that is also a concern. But for me, as I look at the concern part, I also think the National Mass Metering Plan has sort of dealt with that concern, because this is where they are saying, I'm like, the government will support even the MAPs in assessing funding for working capital, in assessing funding for setting up locally, so that meters are produced locally. And again, because of the size of the market we have, you can have new manufacturers coming, you can have new assemblers coming to make meters available locally. I think generally for us, this national mass metering program would help to a large extent to achieve bridging the metering gap that we have. It would help to improve quality of service to customers, because a lot of the complaints we have from customers has always been around billing, challenging estimates. And then for us as a DISCO, it would improve our collection, right? And when our collection improves, it puts us in a better position to be able to meet our own minimum remittance to the market. And also be in a position to begin to earn return, which you can redeploy into the business and further invest into the business. Because as we know, there's a lot of investment that needs to go into this business in terms of expansion. I think these would all work together to ensure that the schools are better placed to render the required service going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Olukoju. That was nice one. But before I move to Ms. Chantelle, Abdul, I would really like to ask one more question, because I would like the commissioner to actually come after everybody has spoken, so that they can actually address some of the issues that probably would have been raised in between it. But my question is, now as a finance expert really that you are, what does this really do for the books of the DISCOs? The way the program is right now at the moment is that it's going to be a fund advanced to the DISCO. So the DISCO, it's a loan. So the DISCO is going to be the primary obligor. So it's going to reflect in the books. And so far we've been talking about illiquidity issues, the fact that we're unable to attract investors, whether debt or equity. People don't want to come in due to certain issues, and especially the kind of debts that are carried at the moment, all the shortfalls, the different interventions we've had, CBN, NEMS, and all others, and of course, all the irrecoverable debts you've had from maybe the MDAs and all of that. These are public, information. But at the end of the day, the major thing is it has deterred investors so far from coming into the business. So now having this again added to your books, what does this really do for the DISCOs?
Thank you. And it's a valid concern that both management and investors in DISCO has had, to say, okay, this is further liability that you're carrying in the books. But as we all know, every business needs funds, right? And so you either fund the business by way of equity, or you fund the business by way of debt. Either way, fund is required. In the case of the DISCO, so similar options, equity or debt. The issue with equity today is there's been a lot of equity pumped in, and I don't know, it's the stage of the business, we don't have new equity at this point in time. So the other option we're left with is debt. Most of us as DISCOs have tried to access debt for a while now, because we recognize that a lot of investment is required. But the issue has been, one, what is the bankability of the DISCOs proud to now that tariff increase has come through? In the past, we've been challenged because the books were read. You are buying at a cost a lot more than the revenue you are making from that same transaction. And so you can't get a commercial lender to sort of support the business, right? And so that is where I would give credit to federal government, give credit to CBN, and give credit to NERC that supported this arrangement, because there are two things to this arrangement. The first one for me is access to fund. Now have fund. The second one for me is you have cheaper fund. This national mass metering, the pricing is about 9%, and about 5% up to February next year, and 9% going forward. You can't access any fund locally at that rate, which to a large extent supports the business, and is within the WACC, weighted average cost of capital allowed in the tariff. The other thing is the tenure of the facility. So before now, if you have any opportunity to be a commercial lender, you are looking at the facility of 3 years, 2 years, 18 months. And what that does to a disco is, how long will you be able to recover the facility? What period of time will you be able to recover that amount from customers? Vis-a-vis, when do you need to pay back to the lender? So then there might be a mismatch where you are using short-term facility to fund a project that recovery is over a longer period. So what this particular project has done for us as a disco is matching the term of the facility with the recovery period of the transaction. So if you look at this arrangement, we're going to recover the facility from tariff. We should be able to recover it within 10-year period. The facility as well is payable over 10-year period. So you're getting a long-term facility, which also allows the business to begin to recover the return on that project. So when you meter today, it's not the day you meter that you begin to see 100% improvement in collection. But in a year's time, in 2 years' time, you would begin to see that improvement in collection happen over time. And by the time you're having to pay so much more in principal, you begin to recover significantly from the market. Remember that the meter would, one, protect your revenue going forward, and would also help you to put a system in place to recover outstanding of today. So I think it's a necessary facility for the disco, and I think we're grateful that this came to the table. We're very hopeful that as the facility has been modeled, it will work, and it will support the discos to make progress.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mrs. Olukoju. I will move quickly to Ms. Abdul. Being the local meter manufacturer, it would be nice to hear from you, because one of the things that this policy actually promotes is local content, and you being in that business, you'll be the best person to let us know what this would actually mean, not just to you being the manufacturer, but what will this do to the people, to the economy, job creation and some other things. So we'd like to hear from you, please, Ms. Abdul. But please, before you come on, sorry, please feel free to send your questions. Just type in your questions, and we'll be taking questions after the whole.
I know.
So you're welcome, Ms. Abdul. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me, Kofo, and it's a pleasure to be here with you and your forum of young lawyers this morning. This is Nigeria's future, and I love talking to young people because I still consider myself very young, and I think I'm still very young in the industry, compared to some of the people on the panel today. But again, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for having me, and of course my fellow panelists who are colleagues in the industry for sure. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. And I think this is a very apropos conversation as well. It's definitely on the foremost, shall I say, it's on the forefront rather of not just this presidency, but obviously the sector as a whole, right? The role that metering plays in the sector. Metering is one thing that I had in the Nigerian power sector. I felt that prior years, we've focused overly on increasing our generating capacity and very little, right, on the very device, right, that ensures that the market is made whole ensures that we increase our revenue collection, which therefore would help reduce our ATC&C. But more importantly, for me, the meter serves as what helps make the Nigerian power sector a bankable proposition. But I think Engineer Ahmad mentioned that so not just the meter alone and its ability to help effectively collect that which is billed, right, to the customer, but also the need for a cost-reflective tariff, which hitherto was non-existent in the market, right? And of course, the market had to go through a series of changes, or shall I say growth over the years, particularly looking at the customer classes, and the average Nigerian's ability, right, to be able to pay these increase in tariff. So the government, of course, had to take their time, obviously, and I think along with the discos, of course, as Bumi was alluding to, probably suffered it, right? But there had to be a meeting of, that which would make the market whole and make the sector bankable vis-a-vis what the average can afford and pay for, right? But for us as players specifically in the metering space, I felt that was the first conversation that we needed to focus on, that as we invest along the chain, whether it's up the grid or further down the chain, right, everything that is invested, whether it's in transmission or in generation, needs to be effectively collected, right, in metering. And the customer will not, have any confidence in the utility if he does not get a meter, right? So the practice of estimated billing is obviously something that for us as a company was a priority and was a mandate to make sure that we can get Nigerians, meters. Mojec has been fortunate enough to be part of the conversation from the get-go, right? From the days of CAPME to, of course, the mass meter rollout that we started doing as a company, which was extending credit to utilities to help them, increase their meter assets, right? Then, of course, the MAP program, which as a player in the sector, Mojec was fortunate enough to be a meter asset provider, as well as, of course, a manufacturer, right? So we retain our position as producing the meters, well, while at the same time, as a MAP, providing the service, right? Which for us was an unbundling of what we did in the past anyway. So as a MAP, the role of the MAP is to finance the rollout of these meters, to assist the utilities, right, to become a financing partner that would help invest in these meter assets, which usually cost a lot of money. And by a lot, I mean, it really runs in the billions to be able to roll out this infrastructure. And when we look at the utilities, one of the things that everybody talks about is their bleeding balance sheets, right? And the inability to be able to take that on board, right? So what MAPS was supposed to do was assist that and ensure that there was an abundance or a proliferation of meters in the market, right? And on the one hand, enable customers to pay up front or finance, customers who wanted to, be financed over a long period of time. Now, what the NNP has done is that it has pretty much tried to collapse everything, the efforts over the years in one, which I think is a very welcome proposition because, as Mr. Olukoju alluded to, it's something that was unavailable in the market, right? So you had players like ourselves providing funding and providing capital, right, to utilities. But this intervention by the government is absolutely welcome because it comes with, as Mr. Olukoju also mentioned, 9%, right, financing loan to the utilities over, I believe it's a 10, 15-year tenor, right? And then more importantly, it pays the provider of these assets upfront. And that helps him, as I always like to talk about, for me and Mr. Olukoju and I talk about this all the time, about the importance of wheeling the supply chain, or rather greasing the supply chain, right? The supply chain is extremely important to ensure that we can continuously have meters on a monthly basis. But to address specifically what NNMP means to manufacturers, and of course to the Nigerian populace generally, this is something that I'm very happy that the government sees eye to eye with us on this particular subject. I was in another panel yesterday where I pointed out, and I have been saying that Nigeria is in a very privileged position today, right? Today we have a metering gap, and the privilege is not the metering gap, but rather what this portends for our economy and just for our people, period, right? That anywhere else in the world, we do not have we don't have the kind of metering gap that Nigeria as a nation and as an economy, not just in Africa, but juxtapose the rest of the world has today, right? The ability to bridge this huge metering gap. What that should therefore do is have an impact on the economy of some sort by creating jobs, right? So the jobs we can create is by increasing our production capacity in country. And also, it should then enable us to begin to even produce a lot of the inputs, right, that we use. Instead of having to import these inputs from China or other countries around the world, whether it's, Asia, the United States, or wherever, right? We should then, as a nation, begin to set up our battery production facilities, our resistor production facilities, the PCBs, because PCB, every electronic that you use around the world uses a PCB, right? So you can, if you have a PCB factory, you could pretty much begin to produce, whether it's cell phones, telephone, computers, phones, whatever, TV, whatever it is, right? And I think we could leverage on this opportunity, right, as a nation, for us to be able to build this capacity. So when you start talking about the impact in terms of jobs from a manufacturing standpoint, right, it is immense. Today in our factory, we have students who are supposed to maybe get jobs in banking that couldn't get jobs, and they're working in the factory. We have students who were fashion designers. We have journalists. We have a bunch of different people who couldn't get jobs in their area of study that are working in the factory today, right? So what the NNMP program does, specifically in phase one, because I know you all may not be aware as to how the program is supposed to work, right? In the phase one segment of this, which is I believe supposed to roll out about 2 to 3 million meters, right? In that phase, production capacity in country will be strengthened. So the CBN is going to provide funding, right, for producers or manufacturers of meters, right, to be able to set up factories to produce these meters. Today, several factories exist in Nigeria that we don't even know. I believe the manufacturing capacity in the country today sits at about up to about 2 to 3 million meters. By the time you add up, pardon me, I think that annually, right? If you add up the total production capacity, right, of the manufacturers in country today, it adds up to about 5 million or more meters, right? Mojec alone is able to do about 1.5, 2 million meters. With our intent right now is to increase that capacity. But the point I'm making here is that many of these companies were moribund. They could not, because there was very little offtake in country. And again, we all know what the issues there was, right? There are many factories in the north, like Encom of Zaria. What you call it? There's Ziglasses. There's Momas. There's Puchiji. There's so many, and many have opened up recently as well, right? Who are MAPs, who again were incentivized, and I think that was the right incentive, right, to get people off of this mindset of constantly, exporting Nigeria's capital into other markets and constantly, and not even creating enough jobs per se, but just importing. And with such an import-dependent economy, that investing in the ability to be able to do so, right, as a nation, and Nigeria see itself as a hub for the rest of Africa, because as goes Nigeria, so goes the rest of Africa, period, right? And you find that most people weren't thinking that way. So this incentive by the government, right, to not only just provide access to finance, but also the inclusion of a tariff, but obviously that tariff is being removed now, right, will help in closing this gap. And I think it's important to explain, the metering gap, right? The metering gap at the time of privatization was at about 80%, right? Fortunately, with all the efforts over the years, it's about 60%, and it still sits at between 6 million meters is the number we're all aiming for right now. But we know that by the time we're done with separation and going out into the field and all that, it's going to definitely be up 10 million meters, if not more. The gentleman on my roundtable yesterday was mentioning that it's probably going to even be about 20 million. That you have 20 million homes and 20 million users in Nigeria, and this is just talking about those who are on grid, right? Before you then begin to get to that off-grid community who has yet to be metered, right? So, Kofo, I think the NNMP is not only just a welcome program, but I think in every way, shape, or form, it will not only just provide jobs in manufacturing, but it will also provide jobs in survey, in installation, which is critical. The most critical deployment to this is not the procurement of the meters, but rather the installation of those meters and the problems that we encounter when you go out into the field. So the readiness of the homes, right, in getting those homes ready to be metered is another, right, predicament in itself, right, that we need to prepare for and plan for, right? How do we make sure that when you go out, you can effectively roll out in masses? To roll out in masses is to prepare, right, Nigerians as a whole to ensure that, you know, their homes are prepared, and we can then be able to sign, you know, hang on the meters on their walls, and for the utility at the end of the day to be able to see it. So it's an ecosystem that is interdependent, you know, and by all means, the regulator, of course, and its ability to be able to see that this service increase, right, to the end user, in order for him to be able to, in order for the utility to bill higher, right, is also seen at the point of the meter as well. I don't want to, you know, I'm sure you probably have other questions for me, but I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Abdul. Yes, I'm sure I have quite a number of questions, but before I get to that, I would like the commissioner to actually say something about this. So, Commissioner, we were actually saving the best for the last, because we know that all of this, the implementation, the enforcement, and all of that, I mean, would actually start from the regulator. And that's the reason why we wanted every stakeholder to talk about this first, and so that you'll be able to maybe address one or two issues that had already been raised by each member of the panelists, while you're also giving us your own thoughts and the thoughts of the commission. We would like to hear from you, sir. You have the floor.
Good morning, and I'd like to thank the organizers for putting this together. And as a lawyer, I'm quite pleased to see that lawyers are taking great interest in the power sector. Before going into today's topic, I would also like everyone to understand that a lot of the problems we're facing in the power sector today were contributed by us lawyers. We've not been able to achieve the major objectives in the power sector. You would have noticed that Mrs. Olukoju spoke about the Disco's books being in red. And the reason why their books are in red was because they're buying a product for 15 naira and they're selling that product for 4 naira. There's no business on the face of the earth that will survive using that model. And I remember when I was in legal practice, one of my partners always told me that, Mr. Akpeneye, we're not the Red Cross. And even the Red Cross have people who fund them. So they get money to do what they need to do. So a few years ago, in 2015, a legal practitioner called Olubunmi went to court to challenge a tariff review in Nigeria. And the Federal High Court ruled in his favor. And on the basis of that ruling, the Commission couldn't carry out any tariff reviews. I'm just setting this up as a background so you understand the context of where we stand in the sector. On the basis of that ruling, the Commission couldn't carry out any tariff reviews until we obtained judgment in our favor at the Court of Appeal in 2018. What that meant was reviews couldn't be done in the sector because we had the judgment against that activity, that regulatory activity of the Commission. And because of that, the federal government had to intervene. And in intervention caused by that distortion of having that precedent against us, we've ended up as a government spending over 1.5 trillion naira thereabouts, meaning funds that could have gone into building universities, schools, roads, and better courts have gone into providing tariff support to the electricity supply industry. So we need to put that in context. And I think as a body of legal practitioners, being a not young lawyer myself anymore, I think we need more of these engagements as lawyers so that we understand the sector better, and when we are better placed and positioned to serve our clients and institute better suits in the public interest. So with that being said, let's go back on how this started. Every Nigerian knows NEPA, and it was the state of our power sector and the electricity supply as being an issue of complaint. And on that basis, we decided to embark on the most power sector privatization in Africa, and one of the most ambitious power sector privatizations anywhere in the world, because Nigeria did an end-to-end, wholesome privatization in one go. Most jurisdictions outside the UK have picked and done the privatization in phases. We went whole swoop, whereby we privatized generators and distribution. Before we got here, we must bear in mind that metering has always been a responsibility of the utility and will always remain a responsibility of the utility because of the revenue assurance nature of that device, that it ties in the DISCO's revenue and gives the DISCO comfort that, okay, I've provided X amount of kilowatt hours to this customer, and also gives the customer comfort in that I have consumed X number of kilowatt hours, and this is what I've paid for. So it's a utility responsibility all over the world, and in every meter that you would see anywhere you travel to, you would see a stamp on that meter that says property of X utility, because it's always a DISCO's responsibility. But the government-owned utility, being NEPA and then PHCN, failed in ensuring that meters were provided to customers. And they had this method of billing you on estimated billing, or when those who had the old black analog meters that had the magnetic dial, you would receive billing. They would never come and inspect it. When I was much younger, living in Sule, the DISCOs used to come, there was a brown card that they would come, read your meter, write the reading, and stick it back into the meter, and on that basis, you would be billed. But as time went on, they stopped reading it, and you would notice that around Salah or around Christmas, your bills would go high. And I remember as a student in Ife, I had to write letters to NEPA then, in being Mr. Olukoju's office in Alausa, complaining about the charges that we had received. So as part of the privatization, government knew and appreciated that metering was a responsibility, was a key issue that had to be addressed. And in part of the DISCOs, the investors in the DISCOs, in taking up the assets, they signed what's called a performance agreement. And in that performance agreement, the KPIs of how they're meant to run the utilities and what they're meant to do is stated in the performance agreement. And you would have heard Mrs. Olukoju speak about the technical terms of ATC and C losses. But the part of that agreement that concerned customers was that DISCOs undertook to close the metering gap and to provide meters within a certain window. We should bear in mind that when the privatization was done, the due diligence prior to taking on the assets on all parameters, especially the technical side, wasn't fully completed. And that gave a window to say that, okay, within the DISCOs took over the assets November 2013. They were given 1 year to go and do other studies. Now, when they now conducted those other studies, a lot of the parameters upon which they took over the business changed. And the commitments provided by government in that, from a revenue assurance standpoint, that we will give you the tariff to that to charge end-use customers so that you can get the required revenues to run this business, there was a mismatch in that. So we now noticed that discos started to find out that there were more customers in the network than were reported when in the initial privatization records. And also they realized, so there were more customers than anticipated, and a lot of these customers were not metered. And because government hadn't given them the required tariffs to do the business, because there's a policy side to it. They were not allowed to charge a tariff that they needed to do the business. They were not getting the required funds to serve all these customers and meet all their obligations. So the first leg on dealing with the metering issue was purely contractual in the performance agreements that the disco signed. And seeing from what they met on ground after they took over the assets, the revenues for them to meet up on the contractual obligations weren't there. So the commission stepped in and we came up with the CAPME program. The CAPME program was done by our predecessors, and it was meant to support the discos with in getting meters, also with funding that had been provided by the CBN. The CBN created the Nigerian Electricity Market Stabilization Fund, the NEMS fund, by which 213 billion naira was given to the 11 discos, and also the CAPME scheme was introduced. Under the CAPME scheme, discos, customers went to discos and paid directly to the discos. And on the basis of this payments made, meters were installed for the customers. The CAPME scheme worked well with some discos, and a few discos were able to increase the meter deployment under the CAPME scheme. But over time, it was realized that there were certain abuses on the scheme in that customers had paid for meters, and these meters were not getting deployed to customers by the discos. And the period of the abuse came up at a time whereby the last set of commissioners had resigned, their tenure had ended, and we hadn't been appointed. So the commission had an acting chairman who was a staff of the commission. And complaints, the Minister of Power now stepped in a role that people said no. It appeared the minister was one leading the sector, but he was the only person at that point in time with legitimacy and authority in the absence of commissioners to lead the sector. And these complaints getting to him, and the minister said, okay, I've received a lot of complaints that customers were paying for meters and these meters had not been deployed. The minister then issued a directive that the CAPME scheme should be collapsed and stopped. So the commission, on the basis of that ministerial directive, stopped the CAPME scheme. Our team of commissioners resumed on the 7th of February, 2017, and what we met on ground was that metering was a big issue and a major complaint. The law mandates the commission to conduct consultations. So anything we're meant to do, we're meant to act in a judicial manner by providing reasons for whatever actions we take. And before we take those actions, we're meant to engage in public consultations. So upon resuming, we engaged in public consultations, and we saw clearly that the discos, from a contractual standpoint, the discos didn't have the funds to meet up on this obligation to provide meters to all their customers. And a hybrid model was required. So we now went on consultations, talking to different stakeholders, talking to the Central Bank of Nigeria and customers across the country. And it was agreed that a hybrid model of the CAPME scheme was required. And that hybrid model we came up with the meter asset provider regulation. Under the meter asset provider regulation, it still involved an element of payments from customers, but the payments, the metering responsibility still rested with the DISCO, but the execution of that responsibility wouldn't be done by the DISCO, but will be done by a new class of permit holders in the sector called meter asset providers. Meter asset providers were meant to be people who had the financial capacity to procure meters and deploy these meters either on upfront payments of meters made by payments made by customers, or on the basis of installment payments or for customers who couldn't pay on basis of installment payments as a hybrid means for an upfront payment, or meter service charge, which is a deduction of energy credits when you vend at the end of the month. So the meter asset provider regulation was, we released it in 2018, and we had expected that massive uptake and deployment. But what happened after we issued the meter asset provider regulation was that between the time frame whereby the MAPs were getting their permits to start doing their job, and because the Commission introduced a consumer protection element in that meter prices would be capped across the country. So the price of a meter in Mubi, Adamawa, would be the same price of a meter in Alausa or in Kebbi State across the country as a customer protection measure. The prices of meters had been agreed. MAPs were making orders for meters, and these meters were meant to come in. What happened was what you would call a policy somersault. Unbeknown to us, government on the other side had increased the tariffs on meters from what was a levy of 5 to 10% to over 35%. That increase in levy to 35% changed the dynamics by which meters could be brought into the country. And a lot of MAPs basically said, we're not importing anymore because we can't import these meters for this same fixed price that you expect us to sell. And in doing our model, we had modeled this amount of duty, and now the duty is this much. So the Commission had to engage governments on steps to be taken to address that duty. Whilst all this was going on, the agitation for metering kept increasing, and I would dare say that estimated billing and lack of meters became the #1 customer complaint problem in Nigeria on any issue. And it then got to the attention of the president that, look, this is becoming an urgent policy intervention is required. And not only is an urgent policy intervention required, we need to take an interagency approach in solving the problems. And that now brought us to the National Mass Metering Program. What the National Mass Metering Program is what I would call a marriage of the policy of government to ensure that meters get to Nigeria with the regulation of the Commission backed with appropriate financial backing. So when we did the MAP regulation, the CBN starts customers to pay for the meters. Government saw this, and Mr. President issued a directive. The first directive issued by the President was the reduction of the import duty on meters. So these meters at the ports could get into the country. Then the other issue, which was raised by Ms. Abdul, was there's no country, I don't think there's any country on earth that has the need for meters that Nigeria has today. We have about 5 to 7 million unmetered customers that need meters. Then we also have customers who have meters, but these meters are not really fit for purpose, in the sense that they're either dumb meters that do not communicate. The discos cannot rely on the integrity. So we need to change all the meters in the sector. We now move over to the customers who have meters now, but the meters need to be changed. Meaning that there's a massive opportunity for meter deployment in Nigeria. And if you look at the dynamics of Nigeria as we sit today, we'll be doing ourselves a big disservice if we just say, let everybody go and open a Form M and start importing meters from China or wherever you can import meters from. That was why the policy now extended that, okay, we would allow the meters to be cleared, those that are already in country, but we need to backward integrate and make Nigeria a hub for meter manufacturing, make Nigeria a hub for using our own resources to create jobs for our people and build capacity for our people in this area. So it's going to create end-to-end value chain. There will be requirements to have meter installers, people who can maintain meters, and even for lawyers as well, the contracting and the intellectual property issues that would come with development of metering technology in Nigeria. So it's better for us to do this and put Nigeria first with this issue, because the power sector is a critical sector that without it, Nigeria cannot move forward. We have the fastest growing population in the world, and that population is primarily very young. And depending on who you talk to, they will tell you that over 70% of our population is under 25. So if you have a young population and the population is growing, you need to diversify and create opportunities for the local market. So what the NMMP seeks to do is sort out the metering program, metering gap with meters that are made in Nigeria. And by doing so, government is putting its balance sheet to support the production and manufacture of meters in Nigeria. This now brings us to the question of MAPs, who had signed on to provide meters to customers. The framework by which meters are being provided is going to change now, because we're now going back to the meter being a core responsibility of the utility. And the MAPs will now need to in phase one, there's a big role for them. But as we move on into subsequent phases, they now need to adapt and change their roles to become meter manufacturers or providers of value-added services in that space. So from a regulatory standpoint, the Commission is currently considering what the NMMP means for the MAP regulation, and consultations are currently ongoing to amend the MAP regulation. So I think that's all for me on the end-to-end.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. That was quite enlightening. But I just want to, before I go to the questions and I mean questions from the audience, there are a few questions that I have for you as the regulator. I understand that you're currently deliberating and consulting with other stakeholders to know how you're going to be able to treat or incorporate the MAPs. But from the current framework that was actually issued, we see that the inventory of the current or existing MAPs before this NMMP was locked at September, I think for September 30th or thereabout. So what this means is for the phase 0, you are still allowing the MAPs under the previous MAP regulation who have already signed the meter service agreements with discos to continue with provision of these meters or the installation, but only to the extent of whatever they had in their stock as at 30th of September. But the concern that this may raise, which I would like you to shed a bit more light on, is as we all know, because they were importing, in the previous map regulation, there's only a 30% local content obligation imposed on these maps, meaning that they have about maybe 70 more to actually import from wherever it is they're importing from. So we all know that for them to be able to do this, there's some deposit that needs to be made, and it probably takes a bit of time before these meters are imported, and they are usually imported in batches. So my worry or my concern is, how do we treat those other batches that have already been initiated but are yet to be within the country after the 30th of September? I mean, the commission actually take this into consideration, especially knowing that some of these maps would have had financial commitments for them to be able to meet up with this. That's the first question. The second question is, I mean, this is a very laudable initiative. I mean, every panelist that actually said it, but the part of one of the benefits that I actually see in this policy is that it's going to also help the current maps who are into importation, just like Ms. Abdul said, to actually go into manufacturing. So it's a way of encouraging them to do that. Does this, are they really also taken into consideration for this financing of local manufacturers? So at the point where they really want to benefit from the funds that is going to be released by the CBN to local manufacturers, would they really be eligible for that, and not just the current meter manufacturers that we have at the moment?
Okay, thank you, madam. The first point, you referred to the map regulations as the previous. No, it's not the previous. We only have one map regulation, and it is still in operation, and that is what we are using. So the map regulation remains extant, but we are looking at amending the regulations to take into cognizance the present realities. So the map regulations remain extant and are being amended. And as it sits, right, we are currently taking into consideration the intention is to have a win-win situation for everyone. And the Central Bank of Nigeria and my colleague, Commissioner Shatti, and the MAPs have been sitting down to discuss. So no one is going to say, oh, anyone who presents his import documents that, look, I have import on the way to Nigeria, right, isn't going to be worse off, because we need those meters in phase one. So no one is being knocked off. But so all the meters that have been imported, right, they're being collated, and discussions are being had with the maps, and Mr. Abdul can refute me if what I'm saying is incorrect. Discussions are being had with the maps to ensure that all meters that have been imported are coming in, so we can mop up all the meters that are currently in warehouses or on some ships coming into Nigeria. But for phase two, looking at the large metering gap that we're seeking to cover, right, we would rather those meters are manufactured in country, and discussions are being had with them to move into manufacturing. So a lot of maps are now not only talking to us, but also talking to the Ministry of Trade and Industry on setting up manufacturing plants in Nigeria, and grants are also being put in place for them to be able to set up to meet that objective. So the issue is, we all agree that it's a priority to bring in meters into Nigeria. We're not discriminating against where these meters come from in phase one, because it's important that the meters come in. Nigerians need these meters. But as we move towards phase two, right, we would rather that those meters are made in Nigeria meters or assembled in Nigeria meters.
Okay, thank you so much, Commissioner. Please, Ms. Abdul, I don't know if you have any areas where you would like to have some form of further assistance from the presidency or the regulator, especially when it comes to terms of enforcement or implementation. Like, what other support would you require from the regulator to help you successfully implement this policy?
Madam Kofo, in fact, the questions I'm hearing and the things you're addressing, one would think we had a prior conversation, and you all are really speaking to the heart of operational issues, or at least some of the things that really confront, the deployment of these meters. And I must applaud you all, I guess, for your thorough research, shall I say, or you must have spoken to several, other maps. This is probably the first time I'm meeting you, and I'm just really just shocked at the depth of conversation.
Thank you very much.
I think, like Commissioner Dafe, mentioned, in fact, that very topic that he discussed, is a very sensitive one. Several maps, right? Many of them had a deployment plan of sorts before the NNMP came on board. So I'm guessing some have spoken to you and they've told you about the fact that, they probably, they made plans to bring meters in. So I think it's absolutely important that the regulator and obviously the owners of the program, being the government, who we are absolutely in talks with. But I definitely speak for maps and probably even manufacturers as well, many who have become, from maps to manufacturers, that this is very important. And I know for a fact that it's being considered, right? It's important that those meters be absorbed, right, and utilized, right? Because in order to get meters in country, especially even under the COVID pandemic era, what took maybe a 3 month, 2 month lead time is now 4, 5 months lead time. So many of those meters that you will see arrive, whether in December, January, February, or what have you, in order to take care of their contractual volumes, were deployed probably, second quarter, third quarter, right? Or even as far as second quarter sometimes, right? So I think that's a very important consideration. The other consideration, which we have the commitment of the government, but we want to see active and immediate commitment, is on the availability of forex, right? I know I probably speak for a lot of other maps as well. Many are having to go to the black market, right, to get their forex, right? Because there's there's a proliferation there. However, a paucity somewhat, at the central bank, and we understand it. We know what's going on in, international economics and politics at the moment. So we understand what's going on globally, right? But nevertheless, it still needs to be, it's a very important consideration because it therefore impacts on the cost, right, of that very device, right? The cost of a meter today, not only does it speak to the component and the design, right, of that particular meter. So every component that goes in, right, for as long as we don't produce them in Nigeria, and this is why I've been beating on this particular issue, for as long as we're not producing, right, our resistors, our batteries, our capacitors, all those different, but the only way we can do that is to incentivize people to do so, produce it. And more importantly, it's not just about the financing, but the offtake, right? So we have to empower our own local economy and, industry in this area. No one's going to set up, a factory to produce batteries and they're not buying it from them, right? Or resistors, and we're not buying it from those producers, right? So I was very elated when, Commissioner Dafe was, kept emphasizing the importance of ensuring that these, meters are produced in Nigeria. And what it really means is that it's creating jobs for our people. We're keeping our money in country. It's increasing, at least contributing somewhat, maybe not as much as oil does, but significantly, right? For as long as this power conversation continues, right, we can begin to contribute to our GDP, right? And for me, what's more important is the average Nigerian has, he can have a job to be able to pay for the light bill that Mrs. Olukoju needs paid, and Eco Disco and quite a, discos across the country, period, right? So whether his job is to install the meters or his job is to work in one of the battery, factories or what have you, right? There are jobs, and these Nigerians can now begin to pay for their light bill, as opposed to what we all know exists in the sector today, which is energy theft. And I think for the most part, the incentive to, for energy theft is, come, I know get job, I know get this, and yet my bill, they go up all the time. Where am I going to get the money from? Excuse me. So I think this is a very, very important consideration. But back to the issue of the cost of the meter itself. For as long as we're not keeping costs low by ensuring that we have, as much as possible from the central bank, right? The cost of procuring these components, right, at the CBN rate, right, it automatically inflates, and I mean by 40% or 50% if we're sourcing dollars, right, at 474. I was told the other day, literally this week, that it's at 490 something, right? That's not provided for at the current cost, but nobody who is an end user wants to hear that, right? So we all say in the community that, you know, power sector is the only sector, and I'm sure the discos will say, welcome to the club, right? Where, you know, you cannot automatically increase the price just commensurate to market forces, right? But nevertheless, you must sort of remain at a certain bracket. So if that's going to be the case, then there's going to be some need either for a subsidy, but nobody wants to talk about that because we can't even afford it as a nation to talk about subsidizing it, right? So there's some work being done, obviously, about trying to revise and redesign the meter to try to make it cheaper somewhat. But the message here really is that the support is required there when it comes to being able to get these meters at a CBN, benchmark forex rate as opposed to the black market, right? Then secondly, the government has also intervened in this particular area. Is also the ease of clearance from the ports. This was a major bottleneck in the past, right? We suffered it for months where we had goods arrive, just even around this period in Nigeria, where everybody's bringing in all sorts of stuff because of the Christmas era, what have you. And it took about 3 months, right? This was not related to even a levy issue. This was just the glut period at our ports, right? We must come up with ways to ensure, otherwise we're going to have meters sitting at the ports, right? Not due to for any intelligent reason, but just the fact that we haven't sort of thought about how do we efficiently ensure that customs is clear, right? That meters are a priority and it needs to be communicated. I think the government needs to sound this message off clearly, that upon arrival, I remember, in the previous era when privatization was, just beginning, it was a message that was sounded to everyone. It was considered priority, right? For when goods arrive, we must clear this immediately. Otherwise, we will always have this lag where we just don't have meters, right? And where are they? They're sitting in our ports. We're trying to exit Ikeja ports. And I think lastly, it's also just to enable, there's a certification that's required before meters go out. And this is NEMSA, right? Now, NEMSA are friends of the house. For us, we've worked with them for many years, love them, dearly. And I know they're doing their best. The honest truth, they're doing their best. But I think we also need to think about, ways in which maybe additional facilities can be provided. Because when you're talking about the deployment of 1 million meters, it's no easy feat whatsoever, right? When you think about everything that goes into it, at least for us, when we're doing everything from producing it, right, to find, to then having to test it, right? So ensuring that we get facilities like ours who are manufacturers, where we have test benches in-house, right? Could NEMSA officials come in, right, use those test benches and maybe, take care of some of those certifications as required before it goes out into the field, so those are some of the consideration. But I think the critical ones have been, addressed by virtue of this NNMP and the provision of funding and financing. But the next critical one really is the issue of forex and availability of it for us to be able to see a proliferation of meters in the market as we need.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abdul. I think those are very, very valid concerns. But before the commissioner would react to that, I would like to hear from Mrs. Olukoju, if you can also answer that question from the perspective of the DISCO. Are there areas that you would like more support for the implementation of this?
More support from women.
Sorry?
The most support is from you, from NERC, from government, from NERC.
Okay, I think from the government right now, because we have the regulator here. If you have anything to say about the map, also whatever assistance you require, go ahead, please feel free, because we want to know those things you would really need more to be able to successfully implement this. I mean, this is a program we would really love to see be successful. So are there areas where you would like any other stakeholder aside the regulator, whether the map or, let's hear from you, please.
The map, that's closer home. I think our system has never been devoid of policies. the issue is always how the policies are implemented or executed. So as I said, this national mass metering plan is very laudable. And so now if there's fund and meters are very available, we also have the MS fees readily available to install those meters. We would increase the pace of metering. There's always been argument of what can be reasonably installed in a month. And I guess the maps are in a better position to indicate that, because what you can install in a month is a function of the resources you put into that installation. So some maps will say to you like, oh, they can install 10,000 in a month, some would say they can install 2,000 in a month, you know. And so from the map side, it would be good to see them a resource to be able to push through increased number of metering month on month, because that will go a long way to ensure that we can capture a lot of the metered customers within a month or within a year. For us in IE, for instance, we're very hopeful that if everything is all right, in the pace of 2 years, we should close our metering gap. But you see, that pace of 2 years, it has to do with a lot of support from the maps. You know, it's not just enough to say that this is the location of the map. It's important to ensure that the maps work within our own plan. If we agree with the maps that 10,000, 50,000 should be executed in a month, the maps need to be resourced to be able to do that. Now that we find out that the challenge with funding is off the table, we can have that smooth rollout. That's from the map side of things. From the government side of things, of course, today the bucket of fund is not infinite, you know, it's limited to a certain amount. The question is, are we going to need more than that? And we might need more than that at some point. So, I guess further engagement at the point where we realize that we need more funds to be able to close the gap. But we're also hopeful that the recoveries that will be made from this first, second phase of metering will also improve the liquidity of the discourse to see what more we can do on our part. Because honestly, what is happening in the market now, more than ever before, there's more willingness to support the discourse financially to see a lot of things come true. From the regulator side, I know Controller Dafe will now look up. From the regulator side, one area is how to recover the cost of the meter. Today, it does seem as if the regulator is leaning on the side of recovery through tariffs. And because a lot of investment, as you may know, every investment of a diesel is recovered through tariffs. Because a lot of investment is required in the next 2-3 years, one way to also not overburden that tariff is to possibly look at a situation where recovery for meter can come as a fixed charge. Because you would see that as you meter customers will be more conscious of consumption. A customer that would, before now, fire on several ACs, switch on light unlimited without control. The moment that customer is metered, you will see a lot of demand side consumption management. We've seen instances where you would say this DT is overloaded. And the moment metering density on that particular distribution transformer increases significantly, you will see consumption on that DT reduce because people begin to manage consumption. And so, if consumption is so managed, you can find out that it takes a longer time to recover the cost of the meter if the tariff is used to recover the cost of the meter. So one option that we think might be better is to look at recovering the meter as a fixed charge, so that every customer that you have metered over the life of the meter is paying a token. It could be 100 naira, it could be 500 naira, depending on how long. Is paying a token towards recovery of the cost of the meter, regardless of the number of units we are vending on a monthly basis. I think that would be helpful to sort of see to a quick recovery of the meter. I will pause here.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Olukoju. Commissioner, over to you, please.
Okay. I would start by saying, first of all, in cost-reflective tariff, right? The first word there is cost, meaning it's a tariff that takes into consideration all the cost. And if we acknowledge that we are moving towards cost-reflective tariffs and are given the disclosed cost-reflective tariffs at this point in time and are currently transitioning towards that, a meter cost is the cost that goes into that. So she's the finance person. She has to plug the numbers to ensure that those costs are covered. If in the event that the costs aren't covered, we, as a commission by law, we are mandated to listen. We are mandated to act judicially, listen and give reasons for your decisions. In the event that that model can't work, there will be consultations to see how it would work. And in order to move this forward, the consultations wouldn't just be with the DISCO itself. We would consult with the DISCOs, we would consult with government, and we'll consult with the customers. We need to be very mindful that electricity pricing is a sensitive issue in the political economy, and it's an issue that is holding up the development of the sector. I would say, no doubt, we have the largest power market in Africa and the largest power market in the world on a development, from a development angle. If you look at the installed capacity of almost 13,000 megawatts to a population of 210 million people, and we're doing average generation of 4,500 megawatts, that is grossly inadequate. People aren't knocking on our doors because the pricing isn't right. Investment follows certainty. We need to start moving the sector towards certainty. And no one is going to invest because you have 210 million people. People will invest when you have 210 million people, one, who have a demand for power, and two, who pay for that power. If once we put those two indices in place, we would see that there will be a lot of M&A transactions with people seeking to want to acquire DISCOs and people wanting to invest across the value chain. As we sit today, those things can't happen because the pricing isn't right. One of the things required to address the pricing is this metering issue, in that customers support the value chain. And if you do not address the issue of customer confidence, they are not going to move on. So the ways we address the issue of customer confidence is, one, ensuring that customers are metered; two, having an appropriate legal framework that addresses electricity theft. And Mr. Olukoju also spoke on the issue of consumption consciousness. That when people get metered, they start to measure their consumption and manage their consumption. But we should also bear in mind that power is aspirational. And let's not just look at those of us. Look at, and I'll use an illustration of a friend of mine who said when his megad moved from the north to his house in Lagos, he set up a small shed with a pan, selling stuff. From there, he bought a small fridge. From buying a small fridge, the Coca-Cola trucks started coming to his house. He had the Coca-Cola fridge and freezer in his house. So as economic activity increases, no matter how much you want to be conscious of managing your power, your demand for power will also increase. But the beauty is that you will have the power to pay for that power that you are currently demanding. So a man who only doesn't have a fridge will buy a fridge, will buy a microwave, will buy a washing machine. And in some jurisdictions, the utilities, the discos, partnered with the people who sell white goods and home goods, and they subsidize the sale of these goods to customers so that people can buy more fridges, more irons, more televisions, and consume more power. And that model has been clearly applied by HP for printers. To buy a printer costs nothing, but the business model is in the toners, because you will notice that 2 sets of toners is the cost of the printer itself. So the model of the business isn't the printer, but the sale of those toners to sustain it, because you need to keep printing and you need those toners to keep printing. Same thing too, we need to start pushing the Nigerians to consume power, but you can only consume what is there. And so we need to improve the power that gets to Nigerians. And also, after improving the power that gets to Nigerians, we need to ensure that that power is available. So once people have meters and there's power, consumption will go up as well. I think I'm done.
Okay, sorry. I think I have a bit of problem with my network. Okay, thank you. Would you want to say anything about some of the concerns raised by Ms. Abdul regarding the Forex and would you want to say 1 or 2 things about that before we go to the questions from the audience?
All I would say is Ms. Abdul isn't a stranger to the commission, and she's clearly aware that my colleagues and I have taken, first of all, we operate an open door policy.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. I think your network is a bit bad. We didn't get anything that you just said. Okay. Hello, Commissioner. Okay.
The network is closing.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So when we wait for
different offices, and I see her always in NERC, she knows.
Sorry, Commissioner, we didn't hear most of the things you actually said. If you can go over that again, I think your connection was a bit weak.
Okay, I said, as Ms. Abdul is aware, she's a welcome visitor in NERC, and we operate an open door policy. And she's aware that the commissioners are listening, and not only are we listening, we're acting upon what we hear. We're working with all concerned stakeholders in government, with the central bank and the presidency, from a monetary and policy standpoint to ensure that these issues are addressed. The way things work, you can't have everything you want immediately. We have to walk through, we need to claim land as we go. Issues can be solved overnight, but there's a deliberate effort to solving the issues.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I think we have quite a number of questions right now. I would want us to just take as many few questions that we can, because I think we have like 15 or 10 minutes to wrap up the session. I see 2 hands up. The organizer, I don't know if we can actually give 2 minutes. Mr. Nwani can we give a minute to Mr. Nwani to actually say something? John, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. So no problem. You can go ahead.
All right. Mr. Nwani, please go ahead. I just unmuted you. So please, you have a minute to quickly say what you want to say, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity for me to contribute to this very important discussion. And also thank you, Commissioner Dafe, for very extensive explanations you gave regarding the map. My name is Chuks Nwani. I'm a lawyer, and also I'm an industry person. I want to talk about the National Mass Metering Program and the meter asset provider regulation as it is today. Mine is more of suggestion because I'm aware there's a lot of existing contracts, meter service contracts pending. So in phase 1 of the mass metering plan, I am thinking that the MAPs who have subsisting contracts should be given first right of refusal, either to set up a local assembly plant or to contract with local manufacturers in order to meet up with their obligation. Because I'm aware that when the MAP regulation came up in 2018, the CAPME program and other contracts that were consummated under the previous regime were all saved. And they say going forward, all those contracts can now be executed under this new regime. This is in order to reduce rancor or any other litigation that may stall this process. Secondly, as an MAP, I'm aware that they had challenges in sourcing the 30% from the local meter manufacturers. Looking at the fact that today, every day, the sector loses 1.3 billion naira in terms of unaccounted energy. My preference would have been that for the time being, we democratize bringing in this meter in order to close these gaps so that to reduce these deficits, the fact that we'll be losing 1.3 billion on a daily basis to what we'll be saving in terms of limiting the meter to only meter manufacturers. We could be able to work at it and say which of them pays the country better. I think basically just these two that I want to contribute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wani. Commissioner?
Okay, thank you very much, my learned friend and industry participant. Right of first refusal. I think that already exists. There's no need to be legalistic. The provision of meters is a closed market, right? Only a few people are playing in that space, and that space still remote maps or both, like Mr. Abdul, who is also a meter manufacturer and a map. So they're still in that space. The issue of democratizing the process of bringing the meters into the country, that's already being done. We've pretty much adopted the policy of no meter left behind. All meters that have been ordered and will be allowed to come, are being allowed to come into the country. The issue is what happens going forward. And we need to be very mindful, which is what people haven't spoken about. The way we're moving to now is, you would have noticed Mr. Olukoju said this issue of the cost of the meters, right? Whereby we are moving the cost of the meters into the tariff, in that we recognize that the meters, we now have a cost-reflective tariff, and recognizing that metering is a cost, and the cost of meter will also go into that tariff. Mrs. Olukoju alluded to having a meter, a fixed charge for customers to pay on a monthly basis for meters, fixed charge. Now, most maps, or let me not say most maps, some maps or a map, right, would prefer the business to run that way, right? That he wants to be collecting money directly. And so that map has even gone to court to challenge what the commission is doing. But we need to be mindful of the fact that government exists for the welfare and security of its people, right? No one Nigerian can tell 210 million Nigerians how to live by, right? And as lawyers, rights are protected. But where you have a right, right, you need to monetize what that right is. And when you look at the monetary qualification of your right, and you list that monetary qualification with the right of 210 million Nigerians and an economy that wants to move forward, and an economy that doesn't want to be the poverty capital of the world anymore, right? Strategies need to be put in place on how to move this country forward. And you just, one person, you can't think you have the sole preserve of over what the government and other Nigerians are thinking on how to move the sector forward. So where we sit now is that we are saying now that, look, let us recognize this as part of a meter cost. And we should also bear in mind that on the principle of privity of contract, the MAFs do not have a contract with me, the commission. The MAFs have a contract with DISCOs to provide meters on the basis of their, the contract that they have that was signed under the auspices of the MAP regulation. And they now have to sit down with DISCOs, right, to agree on how they execute and perform on that contract. And if there's an evolution of how things are moving, it's for them to sit down with the DISCOs first and say, we now have this MMP, National Mass Metering Program. I have this contract with you. How do we align and grow our obligations under this program, under this MAP program, into the NMMP? We can't be seeking to say, oh, let customers continue to pay, when governments are said as a policy issue that we do not want Nigerians to pay for meters. So that's where we stand, and we need to be very circumspect on how we move forward.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'll go ahead and read out some of these questions as quickly as we can. The first question, okay, I think it has to do with if the commission already has any, sorry, just a minute. Okay, what will be the role of MAPS in this mass metering initiative? I believe this has already been answered. Why don't we put bans on consumption for the month instead of availability, as consumption is directly proportional to power supply, and it takes note of the final customers, not just feeder availability? Mrs. Olukoju, do you want to answer this? I think it's talking about the service reflective tariff model that is going to be adopted by the DISCO.
Yes, yes. So this person is saying, as against looking at the availability of the feeder to determine tariff, we should look at what is consuming. Service-based tariff is to allow for customers who are enjoying their pocket service to pay the right amount, while the customers that you haven't upgraded to that service level to see the subsidize. And ultimately, when all the investment is done and all customers are the same service level, everyone pays the cost-effective tariff. And so if that is the case, the DISCOs must be in a position to identify areas where a certain quality of service can be delivered. So if I take an area under cluster A, for instance, where my network has been upgraded and put in a shape where I can deliver 20 to 24 hours of power, it just makes sense for similar group of customers to pay the same amount as against the situation where you're saying, customer A, I've chosen to take only 4 hours. When I've given you availability of 24 hours, you pay cheaper. But customer B, who on that same feeder, has chosen to take 24 hours. You can always control demand, but you have provided a service. You pay for the service. So the service someone on band A is paying for is a service that quantifies availability. Similar to the way when you look at the generation company, there's capacity, there's energy. So in this case, that feeder has the availability to give you 24 hours. When you choose to take less than that 24 hours or 20 hours, not a problem. You take their corporate tariff times the number of hours of your own consumption. It doesn't show the tariff. The tariff is a function of service delivered within that cluster.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Olukoju. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner. Yes, please.
Okay. I think I would need to provide some clarity to that question. The person is saying, if I understand this question right, that the ban should be based on consumption, actual consumption, and not availability. The key, right, to the sector is, and the cost is on making that power available. So in the UK and in the West, you know that you're always going to have power. So that investment has been made in availability, knowing that when I get home, I switch on my power is coming on, right? So the investment is in ensuring that power is available, right? Whether you choose to consume that power or not, power consumption is elective. You will have noticed that Mrs. Olukoju made reference to the minute customers have meters, they start to put in place demand side management, putting LED bulbs, not putting on all their ACs, knowing what time to put on the water heater. But the key thing there is ensuring that power is available. Now, if area A, right, is guaranteed a certain number of hours guaranteed, the investment that has been made the incentive to make that investment wasn't on the basis of your consumption, right? It was made holistically for the entire area that has now put that area into a specific band, right? What the questioner is saying now is a model that is called increasing block tariffs, right? And that is something that will be put in place as the sector evolves when everybody has been metered. So an increasing block tariff system says that from consumption 0 to 50 kilowatt hours, this is the tariff band. Consumption 51 to 200 kilowatt hours, it now goes up. From 200 kilowatt hours to 500 kilowatt hours, it now goes up. But I don't think where we sit today, we are not there to put that, because not everyone has meters and not everybody is getting the same uniformity of supply. When we get to the level whereby all customers have meters and are enjoying the same supply experience, we can now start thinking of putting in place an increasing block tariff system that changes the tariff on the basis of consumption of individual customers.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll just quickly run through some very important questions here. So there's one that asked, so what is the modality of refunds for customers who paid upfront under the MAP scheme? And there's another question that is also related, which is, I want to know what becomes of the meters purchased under the meter service charge framework. So I'm sure the audience would like some clarity, because I think this mass metering is probably giving the impression that whoever was under, the previous mass, the current mass, the MAP scheme would actually have to stall. So they're actually asking what becomes of those people who have opted for the MSC arrangement under the current MAP scheme, and if the customers would be entitled to some refund for any upfront payment that had already been initially made to the MAP. Commissioner, please, would you like to say something about this? Or,
Okay, yes. So like I said earlier, that the regulation is being looked at. We are fully aware that certain customers signed onto the scheme, and certain customers have gotten meters on the basis of an upfront payment, and certain customers have also gotten meters with the expectation of being charged on a monthly basis for metering service charge. We are collating the entire impact, the number of these customers, and an appropriate mechanism to address where they stand, knowing that there has to be parity in how we treat customers. So we can't have customers who have made an investment and we say, oh, you're on your own. No. So all the customers will be taken into cognizance in the various discourse, and an appropriate framework will be put in place upon conclusion of the review of MAP regulation, right, that addresses their concerns.
Thank you very much. With what with that, we can do away with the problem and cost of importation? And then the second one is, what is the average production cost of the meters?
Okay, so very good questions. I think the first one, why do we need to import the meters? By the time the aggregate install capacity is well over 4 million or more, right? When you look at everyone's annual, in fact, it exceeds 6 million, in my opinion. Because when you look at the two major ones, and then you look at everyone else, CIG of South Africa is in the market. You have Prodigy, you have quite a few others, I believe. Holly's coming, on stream. Quite a lot of people are coming on stream. Now, the reason why we have a Forex component in all of this is, like I alluded to earlier, the components required to produce these meters are not produced in Nigeria. So what it takes, right, for you to import inputs, right? What we produce in Nigeria today pretty much are cables, which are used within the meter and without during installation, right? And then the hard cases, right? So the hard case, which is as Commissioner alluded to earlier, if you do a backward integration, yeah, if you do a backward integration and then you look at what it takes to produce, the hard case, which is really the plastics, right? Element and quite a few others, petrochemical factories are non-functional today, right? So the components required that also have to be imported, right? So there's always an import element of some sort at the moment. And so as a company, we are looking at this closely as to what significant, percentage of our production can be done in country. And I think for other manufacturers as well, it's something we need to look at, but it's not something that we will do, on our own, right? It's something that we will do, in collaboration with the government to ensure, as I said before, if there is not an offtake or existing offtake market, right, there's no justification for investment, and investors will run in the opposite direction. No one's going to bring the money to the table to set up these factories if we don't have the guarantee of takes in country. So that's where the Forex factor comes in, right? Until we start producing it ourselves in Nigeria, we will have to, either keep importing them. So we're addressing that today as a company, and I know that other manufacturers are looking at this closely as to how much of these materials, these inputs, can we start producing in Nigeria, right? Your second question, please remind me.
Average cost of a meter.
Average cost of a meter. Now, that varies greatly because it depends on the kind of meter we're talking about. It depends on the communication module that meter has. So what a lot of people don't realize today is that the world of smart metering, in fact, and the world of prepayment of meters began actually out of Africa, right? Due to the fact that a lot of people, there was very poor collections in terms of when billing and revenue collection, right? In fact, it's originated out of South Africa, where the need to prepay for what you consume, right, is where the STS, right, and vending platform comes from, right? So many meters also had to go smart, because before, what we call NEPA officials back then, but of course the disco staff today, right, would have to go into the customer's premises, right, in order to be able to read the meter. Most times they were not even allowed in, or the Agano Day, or different things like that, where they were not able to access, right, the home and be able to read the meter. Today, you can read it remotely. That is a smart function that allows or enables, and this is very important, right? Everybody must understand the importance of paying our bills and being, in order to help make this entire sector whole, right? So if you're talking about a smart meter, right, the end user, today we have to take the meter away from the end user and put it on a pole. Why? Because most people tamper with the meter. If they're not tampering with it, they're trying to bypass the meter altogether, right? So things that, most meters abroad don't necessarily have. We have to build the meters in Nigeria suit for purpose or fit for purpose for our market, right? One, be able to detect the various tampering that customers do, or even the bypasses that customers do also, right? And then, as I mentioned before, take it as far away from the pole so that, or rather put it on the electricity pole so that the customer is away from the customer to disincentivize them from, trying to tamper or bypass the meter. Then they now have what is known as a UIU, which is a user interface unit, where that is the module that you communicate with to be able to know how much you have vended, how much you have consumed, is it running out, etc. Right? So those add-ons and the very various features that I mentioned end up increasing the cost of the meter. If we had a disciplined market where our consumers were not necessarily either tampering or necessarily trying to even engage the meter whatsoever, in other climes, right, meters are nothing sexy, nothing integrate or what have you, right? You don't have to build in these issues that we're talking about that are pervasive in the Nigerian market, right? So we're very careful, not to we're very careful to make sure that on the one hand, I met with some Indians recently, and they talked about how their meters are built with over 50 different tamper functions, 50, almost over 150 bypass functions, right? So the more you put into a meter, the more expensive it becomes. So to answer the question, it varies, it ranges, but the average cost is, when you then factor in, of course, inflation and Forex and all these other things that we're talking about, at the very minimum, today it stands at about 37,000.
Okay, thank you so much. So I will just quickly summarize into two more questions, one for the commissioner, one for Mrs. Olukoju. I've seen that most of the questions asked here have something to do with trying to understand how this is going to play out. Asking questions like, do I pick up from the map? Do I pay the map directly? So Mr. Olukoju, if you could just summarize in a minute, maybe the steps to be taken by the customers to be able to benefit from this. I mean, in what way is the DISCO going to roll this out? Are they going to be making applications, and are they going to be picking up or installing by themselves? Because those are the questions they've asked. So if you could just have that in 1 minute. But Commissioner, the question that was directed, that was meant for you says, concerning the backward integration plan in subsequent phases of the NMMP, is there a consideration for a uniform meter type to be deployed across the country, such that business can specialize in the production of meter components, e.g. the meter box, PCBs, etc.? So please, if we can, I don't know, maybe Mrs. Olukoju should go first to answer her question. Okay.
Thank you, Kofo. So for this national mass metering plan, it's going to be a bit different from how MAP was run. On the map, a customer could elect to pay, and across the network, you have the maps moving from one point to the other, trying to meter everyone. Under this national mass metering plan, what we're doing is a focused mass rollout of meters. And so when you're doing a mass rollout of meters, you will have to do a plan over a period. And so you would start from one area and gradually move on to the other areas. So for this phase 0, we have put up a plan that covers our customers within band A, B, C. As we know, of course, most DISCOs have small chunks based on the meters that are in country now. So the customers at this point in time need not do anything with respect to paying for meter or trying to pay for meter. The DISCOs have given out a rollout plan to the commission, and that same rollout plan is what has been shared with the maps. And so these areas that I've mentioned, clusters A, B, C, on this rollout plan, depending on the time for each location, the metering will be on feeders, on DTs, such that when you take this area, you close out the gap on this area, and then you move to the other areas. That is what you'll be seeing from now onward. For the customers that have paid under MAP, the initial plan now is to close out for every customer that have paid under MAP. And then customers are also expected to go to our website to be able to update their customer record. I think it's very important. Some customers may also want a situation where they require separation, maybe in one block of flats. Previously is one customer account. You want to have it separated into 6 customer accounts, 4 customer accounts. Please go to our website where you can do that, so that when it gets to your property, it's then easier to just allocate as many meters as you want within the rollout plan. Customers are not meant to pay for meters again. If anyone asks you to pay for meter, please escalate it to be our whistleblowing channels.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to believe that every disco would have their own whistleblowing platform. So please feel free to whistleblow in case anybody approaches you for payment. Commissioner, sir, please, you have the floor. Okay.
I think the question was regards to backward integration and a uniform meter type.
Yes.
What really matters, right? We have a metering code, and the metering code specifies the minimum standards for each meter. Now, so the meter itself is like your phone, right? What matters to the disco is the ability to communicate with their vending platform and configuration of that meter through the disco's vending platform, right? Because that is that's the issue. So it's not the physical box, right? Certain discos have requested additional features on the meters on the basis of the uniqueness of their networks with regard to the human intervention, being electricity theft. So some areas are more prone to theft than other areas. So they've put that in place. So as we move towards manufacturing of meters in Nigeria, right? Meters will be manufactured in accordance with the metering code, but meters are not things that you just pick off the shelf. So you just can't have meters, put them on display. The meters are manufactured to meet specifications for installation on specific disco networks, right? Because the discos do not have the same vending platforms, right? Each meter must be programmed to fit into a disco's network.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I think Ms. Abdul, you want to say something? Okay.
No, I was just going to support what Mr. Olukoju said about the importance of people and end users from paying for meters. As a MAP, we are still receiving payments from customers in the droves, and I know we're going to be doing a communication across the country to really let people be aware of this, mass meter rollout, and the fact that they don't need to pay for meters anymore, right? And then more importantly, also, that should anyone ask you or try to extort you, right, for payment of anything, right, it is your prerogative and your right as the consumer, right, to, for some reason, I find it the weirdest where consumers usually want to keep this to themselves and they're not, forthcoming about who it was or what have you there. They think they want to protect their, their favorite electrician or what have you, right? But he's asking you for 3, 4, sometimes 10 times the actual cost of these meters. So just to see what you all at NBA can do in terms of making this widely known to end users and not becoming victims of some of these extortion practices that is pervasive, particularly in Lagos, pervasive across the country.
Okay, thank you so much. We're getting to the end of the session, but I have one feedback that I would like to read out, and I think this specifically is for the discos. So I have a feedback which is the excellent the user experience hasn't been too good for customers. Customer complaints, turnaround time for resolution of disputes is not impressive. The discos have legacy issues of trust and accountability for they must pay attention to customer service and prompt resolution of disputes. And the metering process also needs to be less cumbersome. So this is more or less like a feedback for the discos to actually take back. If you're going to be having this, it's more or less like a way of helping you also be able to successfully implement this program. So they want you to beef up your customer complaints, your turnaround time, fault resolutions, and then also the metering process should also be less cumbersome. I would like to, at this point, take like closing remarks from each of the panelists. Mrs. Olukoju, I think you should go first. We would have Ms. Abdul, and then we would now have Commissioner Dafe. But please, the Commissioner, please, while you are also giving your closing remark, it would be nice to also say one thing about tariff increase. We've had so many questions also around, are you increasing tariff? Are you increasing tariff? AFAM was signed recently. Does this actually mean that there's going to be increments in tariff? So while you're giving your closing remarks, you may actually want to say something about it. So, Mrs. Olukoju, thank you.
Okay, I want to say thank you to the lawyer that gave us the feedback. I guess we've had a number of those kind of feedbacks, and we continue to get better at it. With this service reflective tariff and with the various intervention of the Commission, we are all making good efforts to get better at all that is required of us. Customer service is very key. We're a customer-facing business, and we recognize that as we improve on customer service, it also brings about some loyalty from the customer. And so we're also investing time and money. We have now increased obviously, because as I said earlier, a lot of our complaints come from unmetered customers. With metering, I also want to believe that we begin to see reduction in those complaints. I think this course has to also be supported. We also need to cultivate an habit of paying for service enjoyed. I would encourage that, especially for lawyers, we need to continue to encourage everyone. Tampering or compromising meters is theft. There's no other name to it, whether it's economic crunch or habits, it's theft. And so we must desist from this. Every business wants to be in a position to pay for the product they bought and even make a decent return. And so we are in this business to do that. And we're in the business for the long run. We recognize our shortcomings and we continue to work on that, as where we are is a lot far away from where we started from, but surely we're moving towards the desired position. I want to thank this group for having us or having me. I think I've also, even being a panelist, I've also learned one or two things from this conversation. Realize that in this business, there's no end to learning. We'll continue to learn. I want to say thank you to my fellow panelists. I want to say thank you to Ms. Abdul. She's our map and she's been very fantastic. I want to say thank you to Commissioner Dafe. We take a lot of issues, a lot of concerns to NERC every now and then. As they said, they continue to deliberate and look at them. But so far, so good. This set of commissioners have been very helpful in moving us forward. And I think we're glad. And, you know, we're like Oliver Twist, will continue to come until our problems are fully resolved. Thank you, Kofo. It was nice sharing this time with you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Olukoju. Ms. Abdul, you have the floor, please.
I think Mr. Olukoju has done the vote of thanks for everyone already, so I'm really just going to give my closing remarks. But very well said, Mr. Olukoju. And I was going to say, you have not thanked your very good map, but but thank you nonetheless. You know, as women in the sector, it's always very good to have, you know, the camaraderie and support of other women. Um, just to put the sector forward, we're in a male-dominated industry, and one that needs a lot more female faces, right, and hands on deck, because you know, women tend to bring an emotional intelligence that sometimes is missing in the room, you know. So I definitely appreciate her as a colleague in the market. And of course, our ever able Commissioner Dafe, who speaks very intelligently to a lot of the regulatory, you know, policies and issues. And as Ms. Bumi had said, that you know, this crop of commissioners, you know, at the commission rather, are very hands-on, right? They're also, as you mentioned, open door policy, right? Where they're engaged and they're, you know, listening. And I think that's really what's important, right? Listening. But for us to also move beyond listening to then, you know, effectively and swiftly, right, being able to implement a lot of what we're trying to put into policy, or rather into regulation, so that you know, we can be able to at the operations level, right, see the impact immediately. But to the MBA YLF, right, thank you very much for the invitation. As I said, I never imagined that I would enjoy myself, and that, you know, I thought it was going to be more a lot of, you know, legal discuss, but this has definitely been very informative, and I'm hoping your audience and participants found this very informative as well, right? And I think just in closing for me, it's about the fact that I really want to encourage Nigerians to begin to think, you know, what can my country, or rather to stop thinking, what can my country do for me, but what can I do for this country, right? And for us to know that, especially, you know, this is your young, I don't know what YLF stands for, but I know it has to
Young
do with
Lawyers
young
Forum.
forum, young lawyers, got it. So to know that, you know, you're not going to be young for too long, right? We definitely need to be part of the conversation about shaping and changing the discourse and the narrative of this country. Nigeria sits as the largest country in Africa, the largest economy, largest population. In about a decade or two, you're going to be the third largest in the world, right? You as young lawyers, you know, sit in a very prominent position, right, to not only impact, right, the change that needs to happen in this country, right, but also the growth and the industrialization that we need to see as a nation, right, so that it's not about poverty alleviation, but rather, neither is it just about setting up institutions, but it's really about us creating wealth so that we can move, you know, the purchase parity, right, of the average Nigerian up. And if we do, then we'll probably see less of the vandalism, less of, you know, many of the issues that we're seeing, pretty much just that is pervasive across the country, right? So I hope that, you know, MBA YLF, you all are having conversations, you know, outside of power, but also in, you know, across other, you know, industries in the country. But power is key because it underpins, you know, the growth of everything else, right? And it's a significant conversation to be had. I also want to suggest that you all, you know, as I said, we need to all be a part of the conversation. We need to all be drivers, right, and change agents, right, of solving this problem, the problems that we have in the country. 55% of people are still off the grid, right, and of those who are on the grid, we have epileptic power, but we know that that's going to change, right, and just so that we all as Nigerians need to get involved, need to not just say the disco is the problem. No, it's not the disco. If you were in their shoes, you would know where it hurts a lot, right? But better still to try to understand what is the problem and how can I help you, Disco, improve your customer service problem, or how can I help you improve some of the things that I think the person that, you know, gave suggestions, right? How can we all get involved to support and to move this along? And on that note, I want to thank you. I think Mr. Zakari didn't get to talk much in terms of questions, but he was also very instrumental, right, in enabling the NNMP from, you know, along with, you know, the regulators. I know for a fact that he worked arduously, him and the team at the Villa, they worked arduously, right, in ensuring that we got the CBN's commitment, right, to make these funds available, and it's no easy feat whatsoever, right? To make the funds available both to the utilities and of course to the maps and the manufacturers, right? And last but not least, I think I mentioned, the commission already for the excellent job they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Abdul. Commissioner?
Okay, thank you very much. So we've been asked two questions. The first is tariff increase. The second is AFAM. AFAM is, for clarity purposes, what was sold is a power plant. AFAM is one of the legacy power plants that was owned by, developed prior to privatization, and it was just sold. The sale of a power plant has no direct impact on your tariff from the way the sector is designed. AFAM is going to enter into a power purchase agreement with the bulk buyer being Engr, and Engr has its vesting contracts with the DISCO. So there's no correlation that, oh, AFAM has been sold, because I think it was in this day, I haven't read the papers today, but I gleaned through. That's the way it was reported, right? So the sale of AFAM has nothing to do with your tariff. Coming back to the tariff, by law, we are meant to conduct 2 reviews on an annual basis. So 2 biannual reviews. These reviews take into consideration the macroeconomic indicators. So that's what we are meant to do as a regulator. The reviews are meant to be done consistently, and until what distorted the reviews was that suit I'd mentioned. Since we got the suit out of the way, we've gone back to the normal biannual review cycle. What should be of priority to us is ensuring that we fix the sector. So we need to be very mindful that, and one of the things I learned on this job is your reality isn't your neighbor's reality. I've traveled the length and breadth of this country, and whilst many people are complaining about not having a meter, estimated billing of the tariff, we should bear in mind that over 60% of the population isn't even connected to the grid. So we are also working to bring these people to the grid. And the only way we can bring these people who are Nigerians like you and I onto the grid is by investments in the sector. And the only way we will invest into the sector is by creating a framework that says that Nigerians want power and Nigerians pay for power. So those are very, very critical elements. And in closing, I would like to say that electricity is a niche sector for everyone, from an economic standpoint, from a legal standpoint. And only last year, I had to organize a personal training for my classmates in university on the sector, because a lot of lawyers do not know what the sector is about. So I'm very encouraged with what the YLF, MBA YLF is doing, and will encourage you to continue. And let this be the first of many more. And if you can create the way you have a section on business law, I think at this point in time, from the way electricity is a critical issue to the sector, right? You should have an MBA section on electricity law, whereby the lawyers are being trained on the sector and issues pertaining to the sector. This would affect the quality of advice you give to your clients. Also, I think a lot of the law firms that grew in Nigeria grew on the back of transactions that came about. So when we had the likes of Rotimi Williams Chambers being the leading law firms, it was primary litigation. The likes of Olokun-Olawoyin and Ajumogobi and Okeke came up on the evolution of commercial law, maritime law. They hinged on the back of those transactions to become big law firms. The likes of Bawon Igodalo, right, came up on the back of the banking recapitalization, because they had the skills. Very few people have done due diligence, very few people have done. So this electricity sector presents a new set of opportunities, and only the lawyers that understand it and are versed in it will grow. So it's important that you continue this series, and I would encourage you to keep doing this. And thank you for putting this together.
Thank you very much. I would like to also thank the panelists. I've really enjoyed this so far. And I personally am also very optimistic about this laudable initiative. I am very optimistic that this is actually going to really go a long way, really go a long way. So I want to say thank you so much to our panelists. And I want to also say thank you to MBA Machame for having me as a moderator. And right now I'm going to hand over to the organizers. John and Toby, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ma. We really appreciate. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Olukoju. Thank you, Ms. Abdul. Thank